I think right now is the best time ever. And like people, every time I say that, somebody's like, well, what are you talking about, dude? It's all crazy. I'm like, that's the beauty of our industry right now is the chaos. Because I believe that right now, for the first time ever, the United States government is finally like, whoa, hold on a second now. And we're watching roofers get paid left and right. And the average claim is 25 G's now. It was 15 when I first started.
It's evolve or dissolve is what I always say. But like just door knocking, can't, like, you've got to graduate. Like we have to all graduate. Like it's a great ROI. I mean, your average life of a sales guy is probably 3 years is like the maximum.
The problem was that the room full of talent wasn't able to do what the room full of talent needed to do because you had a C-suite that was basically cock blocking everything.
And if you're one of those rebellious contractors that's just sitting there, you run the risk of getting buzzsawed. There is going to be some Amazons and some Walmarts that are in the space that are going to make it harder to compete. And I'm not saying that you can't compete. That's what I mean, rebellious. I'm a very rebellious person by nature, right? But competing you're going to have to be ready for it.
Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh. You are now tuned in to the best roofing podcast in the world, the Roof Trollz.
Roof Trollz, we're back. So is Suzanne. She just walked back in again. Suzanne, I thought you were gone. Guess not. All right. Well, anyway, Roof Trollz, we're back. So I got some fun guests today. Really excited about it. And one of our guests here, Dustin, we're going to get to you in a second. But then as usual, I have the same boring, lame-ass host that we always do, Angelo and Mike. No one cares. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name Dustin, owner of Three Kings Roofing out of Texas, DFW, the hell capital of the world. Came up here, met Mike, and just having a pretty good time. We were supposed to go to a Cubs game, but, a little weather delayed that. But, yeah, man, just been doing this since 2010 and in the roofing game kind of like you and everybody else, it seems like, trying to make a living. So I guess that's the intro that I need.
That's an awfully brief intro. I mean, tell us a little bit about your background. What got you into roofing? You said 2010. Kind of give us like the whole backstory. Is it
all Dallas Fort Worth too? Like, is this all you've stayed in the one area?
No, I mean we've expanded, worked in like 12 different states. So we've done Oklahoma, Colorado, Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, Tennessee, Florida. Which I don't advise Florida to anybody. That's an expensive venture and mistake that you can make. But yeah, I mean, we definitely grew, and DFW companies that you see, like heavy recruiting and hundreds of sales reps and all that stuff, kind of storm chasing has been our game. And like I said, it's been a wild ride. Had the partnerships that didn't always work out in our company. I started it with two brothers that are not involved anymore, and then some ex-brother-in-laws that were involved that are not involved anymore. Those are expensive mistakes. Picking the wrong partnerships, or, when those things break apart and you have to who damaged who, or, things like that. If it's not done the right way, people tend to go after people's managers and people and, hey, let's start this company. It's easier to go over here. So went through all that. And it's, like I said, I think that's pretty typical in roofing. So if you're partnered, like I know Romans is, y'all got quite a few, you definitely want to make sure that that's the right kind of partnerships, and that y'all always have that mutual respect if y'all ever do go separate ways or whatever it is, or decide to whatever you're doing with your business. But yeah, I definitely went through some of those struggles. And then, now point in my career is just collaboration is really what I'm huge on. I think that's the next kind of stepping stone of where we're at. And then the industry, you've got all the private equity and consolidation, and what does that mean? Why are they doing it? Are questions that I've asked. And so that's why we've come up with a plan and collaborated with a bunch of owners across the country versus being as imperialistic, right? Like when I was going into all these different states and chasing storms, the goal was to set up Three Kings flag in all of those states and be this huge, company. Kind of backed off of that, and just it's easier to collaborate, with a local flagship or brand that's in an area, help them grow, and if we can all figure out how to make money with one another, it can actually work out really well. And
I think a lot of us in this industry have that same philosophy. Like, how do we, make our mark here, and then let's get to the next location or open up another office. And you had said, you wanted to have, plant that flag. What made you back off of that in your story? You said 2010 is when you started.
Yeah. timing and of what's going on in the industry. Also, just it's expensive. You can make some really expensive mistakes, and you can have a company that's doing $30 million and you look at it, year over year or whatever it is, and you're like, man, the money that was made or the profitability of the company got hurt because we're chasing this new market, or trying to find the guy, and usually the guy is who lets you down, because if you're not, it's just the passion of the owner doesn't always transfer into other people, and so it's
100%.
So scaling, especially in roofing, when you've got like a low barrier of entry, where guys can come in and say, oh, I'm going to start a company tomorrow and take these 15 guys that you've been building and training in a different state. It happens to all companies. And so like, it's just a hard thing to do and to manage, and then it gets expensive, and it hurts your profitability, financial strength of your company. And then, like I said, the consolidation in private equity I think needs to be looked at pretty seriously. I don't think that they're doing it on accident. And I think that some of the time has run out for you to be like, I'm going to sit here and just build a company that's going to be here forever, right? Like you're going to have to get big fast, or you're going to have to get small, right? And be like a one-man wrecking crew that just makes yourself, it's a hustle versus a business. And it's just a theory that I have, just paying attention to it and studying what's been going on for the last 2 or 3 years in the industry, and just noticing, and why did that big money, come into I talk about bring the war to our door. I say that a lot. I wasn't looking to like sell my company or really want to do that. But at this point, it's kind of like you've got to compete with those large conglomerates that are happening, or you're going to get buzzsawed.
Is that something you see a lot? I asked, that's something you see a lot in Texas, like your area? Obviously, like you said, Dallas-Fort Worth is a huge market when it comes to hail. Like I know you talked about, Florida, it's a whole different market when it comes to storms. Our area is getting more of that, the storm and things like that. But, we've seen a few like PEs buy up some of the bigger companies. If you're from where we're at, Northwest Indiana here, there's a couple bigger names, M&M, which I don't expect you to know who they are, but they were up here. They're a pretty big company. Yeah. Rogers, they were, purchased. And then there's a few that were in Illinois that went with a different route with, private equity. But do you think it's more of your guys' market where it's just, there's so many of these medium-sized companies where it makes sense to kind of merge and do that, where like private equity would be like, hey, if we can get one in, like how Home Depot is, right? They're not in every town, but every other town, typically there's a big box store. So do you think it's because of something like that where we can manage it and then obviously see the bigger fruit by owning all these small businesses in a large market like yourself?
I think a lot of what I'm looking at is vertical integration. So I think that's why Home Depot has bought SRS, and Beacon has recently sold. And you got BlackRocks of the world that own, BlackRocks and Vanguard. I mean, they invest, so they can't be considered a monopoly, but they are the largest shareholders, I believe, in Allstate, potentially State Farm, Home Depot probably.
Everything.
If you look at it, it's a vertical integration. And I believe that carriers, because of the frequency of storms, they're changing the narrative on some things. I think that it could get to the point of insurances being like health insurance, where it's in network or out of network. And so I think a lot of these conglomerates are being built for the in network that these carriers want to use. And so
when you talk about like that in network, so they tried that some, I'm sure you're aware, with like a Mad Sky, where they have a company that's supposed to be considered third party, but they're in business with the insurance companies. Where do you think the biggest fallout with a company like Mad Sky was? So when I worked at ABC, so brief history is I worked there, I was an outside rep.
Yeah.
And I was talking with someone from Mad Sky, like how I didn't think it would work for everybody. Like a company probably like yours doesn't, Romans it wouldn't work for. But for the newer company that just got out there, if you're trying to get into the insurance game, you get these jobs from the insurance company, you can at least put your flag in that neighborhood, because it's, now the margins, again, you don't always know how they're going to look. But for a small company that just kind of came up, I could see how that could work. But as you grow, obviously, it's not going to be probably the right route. But now Mad Sky really doesn't exist anymore. So what?
But that's inaccurate.
In which part?
Mad Sky still exists. They sold their company, but MRPs has been getting larger and larger, and there's a lot of them. Mm-hmm. It's not just Mad Sky. The Mad Sky, the issue that contractors had is we were all in a fun space, right? Like we were all like where we could be independent and we could, like I said, plant our flag or chase storms, and there was no huge competitor, right? When you have a conglomerate that's coming in, they're coming in not to get like a few files from the carriers, they're trying to get thousands. And so if you go down the street and you've got a person that has 1,000 files direct from a carrier, in a storm or in a market that gets hit, well, you're swimming uphill or swimming up creek or running uphill, and your guys are going to have a hard time because they're moving faster than you. So yes, how you're saying it was a tool, it was definitely a tool that we used with Mad Sky. Mad Sky,
you guys had used something.
Yeah,
like
we
that?
were
Okay.
probably one of their largest in Texas, or one of their
I didn't know
largest
that, yeah.
companies that when they were Mad Sky, and I was a small company, I had like 6 people at that point. And yes, it was a tool that got us moving because we could literally install within 48 hours of a storm. We go next day or whatever day that they give us the file, and then you can order. The problem was they were taking a huge chunk of money buying the material, so obviously they're leveraging the material, the rebates, all of that, but they made a lot of money, and they still exist. They just AccuServe is the name of that particular MRP. I just think that there's and I know this, like Apple Roofing, whose private equity had bought Crest. They're out of the Midwest. They're trying to go DRP, which is direct repair, which is basically an MRP program, but they're getting direct. And it's the same thing in the car industry. Like a Caliber Collision was big, or pretty big where we're at. It's a price control for the carrier, because like y'all have got in Illinois and everywhere else, y'all got the PAs that come in and really hammer insurance companies. It seems great because on an individual deal basis, you're making money. But to an insurance company that's a business, it's like, man, they're taxing us, right? Like, does it take this to get it done? So there is a price control mechanism, but if something gets big enough, which that's what I think they're trying to do, most of the people that I've talked to in those groups and stuff have mentioned some of these type of things. It's going to get hard for the guys like us that are these mid-range size companies. We become tiny. And just think about if, you have 50 guys or 100 guys and they go out into a storm, hit a door, and they're like, great conversation. You do the adjuster appointment, all that stuff. And then it comes to time to get paid. And the insurance company tells them, hey, they're not in network. We're not going to pay for this. You have to use these guys, or you can do it yourself. And we actually had that happen in Florida on a insurance company that told the homeowners that, like, you can use whoever you want to. And it wasn't like an agent. It was the actual like inside adjusters saying, hey, you can either pay for it yourself, or you got to use the people that are in network, right? And I just think that that's kind of a beta test market usually that spreads. And, like putting it out there, I'm not trying to speak it into existence. I just think that we definitely have to be mindful of that. And that's why, like, the collaboration, like I talked about with other owners joining forces, is we have that option. We're talking at scale. We're talking big business, right? Because we're all aligned like a private equity, probably more aligned with what we're doing in a private equity group. And so we've had those conversations with the MRP programs, the carriers, suppliers, all of those things, to where we can have that competitive advantage, right? Because the other thing about, private equity groups, if they're getting, 20%, let's say 25% less on material costs than what you do, that's also a competitive advantage if they want to start retailing or, going cash bidding and driving costs down, et cetera. They're still making money. You would look at it and you'd be like, damn, that's really low margin. Like, why would you'd be turning away jobs, and then they're moving volume, right? And so all that's...
Well, that was going to be my question, not to cut you off, because you've just touched on so many things.
Yeah.
So you had worked with, you said it's Surf Pro now? Is that what the name of it is?
AccuServe is Mad Sky sold, and then AccuServe is the name of Mad Sky's
what it kind of
MRP.
Is now.
Yeah.
But so you had worked with them.
Yes.
And so just to kind of understand, what point was it where you kind of realized that it wasn't that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, right? Because if you're in the beginning, right, you said you had 6 guys, you're getting those jobs, right, at volume. Now the margins aren't there though, but it gets your name out there. You said you're getting in those neighborhoods. Where was it that you were like, hey, this probably isn't, I'm at a point where I need to actually have a little bit more, margin. I can do this myself, or kind of that story behind it.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, using it as a tool, I was probably immature at that time, in the sense of, like, most contractors, oh, F these guys, they're the devil, I'm like making a deal with the devil. cost fixed versus like you get your own projects. Yeah, your margins are extremely higher, right? And then you don't have this like big brother kind of program. But I was kind of naive at that time too, because if I'd have stayed kind of working with them consistently, I'd probably be one of the biggest in that program, right? And I was using it as a tool to grow salespeople, because at first what they did is they paid for the inspections, so they give you like $50 or something. So we'd have 2 or 3 of them, and a new sales guy is literally not having to fight. He's out there to adjust and kind of go through a preferred network.
Okay.
And so I was like, you can keep that money. So you make that, right? So I wasn't having to pay draws and salaries and stuff. And if you close the deal, like you made this much per day, right? You know what I mean? Because the deals are profitable. It's just less profitability, right?
Yeah, not where we're accustomed to the 30 and 40% margins. It's not going to be that.
Yeah. And
well,
now,
you're not paying a sales guy 10% either, whatever you pay them. So, I mean, you could have like what I would call, I'm not going to use the full term, but I'll say like a photo jockey. I'll call him a photo bee. But you have them run out, look at it for $50, $100, or put someone on salary for $30,000, $40,000 a year, have them just run out, have your in-house estimators put the estimate together, send it off to the carrier. I mean, yeah, let's just say if they're taking, I think the MRPs, because shout out to John Michael and Robert Flores, that's basically their business model right now. They're only working off of MRPs. So if they're taking, he told me it's somewhere between 5 and 8% on the jobs. So if they're taking their 5 or 8% off the top, that's your salesperson's commission. If you just have an employee, a salaried employee going out there, taking your pictures and everything, send it to your estimator. I mean, you're basically at the same margins anyway.
And the thing is about them nowadays, like I said, Mad Sky did it in that way. AccuServe still runs a program like that. Other MRPs don't. Other MRPs, like he's saying, they just take a fee, which is close to probably your overhead. That a lot of 10-50-50s out there. I know y'all don't do that, neither do we, but you can make money with them. On at this point in time. Relevancy though is what matters, and that's why I like the platform and collaboration at scale. We're talking about our platform doing all these files. So if you got to think, if you're an MRP, you're basically some nerd that went to the insurance company and said you worked a deal somehow, right? Like you got some deal that happened, and they're giving you all these files to maintain.
Well, that's kind of what they did, and they're remote too. So wherever they send them, they'll go and work the
MRP people don't have companies, like they don't have a company that's nationwide. So they rely on contractor network that they try to manage, and they do. You'll get kicked out of the program if you don't do it the way they want to, and all that kind of stuff. But the point that I'm trying to make is if they need help in the sense, and this is where I've talked to them in the sense of like, hey, like you give our platform of this group a lot of jobs, we manage them, right? Like that's what our job is the oversight, so that they can give us as many files as they possibly can. And they're having to check with one group or one entity, not having to go manage 100 or 200 in all of these different. So that's where, like, if y'all go set up right now with an MRP, and are they going to take you serious? Because it's pretty political. You have to know people. Are they going to give you a file or two? Maybe. And that wouldn't be relevant to anyone. That's why, like, a lot of contractors are like, I don't care. But the ones that are in the background, the money and the big stuff that's going on, they're like, give us hundreds, give us thousands, and watch what happens. And then that company is moving. You know what I mean? Like, you got to think about how much work that is, revenue, profitability. Probably easier to have salespeople. You can pay them less, or project management, whatever you want to call it, because you've got something that's given to them. It's like it's just evolving. It's evolve or dissolve, is what I always say. But like just door knocking can't, like, you've got to graduate. Like, we have to all graduate. Like, it's a great ROI and it's a great business model that a lot of us have been built on, but it can't be the only thing, because salespeople are going to get burnt out. I mean, your average life of a sales guy is probably 3 years is like the maximum, that you're retaining salespeople, because it just gets old, or they want to try to get out of it, right? They want to be like, well, how do I get promoted, or how do I not knock doors? How do I get to be a team lead? Just because it's like, I want to be a closer. Well, everybody does, So if you're giving them opportunities to get in front of people faster, that's good for your business, right? Like, you can probably get higher level salespeople, because good salespeople are closers. They're not marketers, right? And so, like, when you're door knocking and doing A to Z, like a lot of companies, you're wanting them to be marketing, sales, closer, project management, put out the fire, escalation guy, collect, potentially supervise. That's a lot.
That's what I think. I think right now, so I've been in this since 2017. I think right now is the best time ever. And like people, every time I say that, somebody's like, well, what are you talking about, dude? It's all crazy. I'm like, that's the beauty of our industry right now is the chaos. Because I believe that right now, for the first time ever, the United States government is finally like, whoa, hold on a second now. Like, we want to keep making profits off you guys. We want to keep the insurance companies making us a lot of money. But you guys got to start buying shit. You have to. Like, you got to see more transactions, because now we're seeing class actions pop up. Now we're seeing senators and governors flaming, insurance companies right out in person, suing them, states suing insurance companies, states talking about creating their own insurance for individualities. Then we're watching these PEs come in, and we're watching roofers get paid left and right. We're watching roofers expand and grow. And the average claim is 25 G's now. It's 15 when I first started. 12 to 15,000 was like the average claim. Now it's in this market, you're like 24,000 for the average claim. It's not, everybody knows what PA is. Everybody knows that the insurance companies, what they do with the money they're allowed to invest in. We all know the little tactics that they have, but now we know how much they make. Now the country knows how much they're profiting. Now the country knows the tactics are being exposed like live out to them. In my opinion, this whole industry is at like a peak hill, and we don't know which way it's going. 2 years ago, or even last year, everybody swore that insurance was going away. It's gonna fade away. We need to go retail. This industry is getting taken over by PE. But now we're watching, and what I'm seeing on my end is like, I don't know if the insurance is going anywhere, guys. I think that they're going to start buying a lot more, actually. And I think that it's not because they want to. It's going to be because they have to. Because younger generations are like, dude, what? Fuck insurance, And then that's hitting shareholders' pockets, like you alluded to. And once that happens, that's when changes happen. When the shareholders start getting affected, when the pocket starts shrinking, that's when I feel like it's just going to be more buying, more ammo for us. I genuinely think they're trying to clean the industry. I do. Sometimes it's questionable, their methods, but I think that they want the same thing we do. I do believe that. But it's coming to terms with, are we going to be willing to take less to move forward? Are they going to be willing to pay out more to move forward together? That's what the question is, and I don't think any of us know that.
The thing with the insurance, though, is like, I don't think it's going away. I mean, and the thing is, it's all cyclical. I mean, you have that's the whole deal. State Farm will deny. You'll have a class action lawsuit, and then they'll pay out easier, right? Allstate was the one that was hard for a long time. They started paying out. So it's cyclical. They're a business, right? And so like at the end of the year, if their shareholders and numbers aren't looking good, they're going to delay claims into the following year because of their books and shareholders, right? Like it's a business. And my thing with insurance is like, I don't hate them, right? A lot of people are like, F them and all this stuff. Is like, they pay us all and vice versa. If we're not out there fixing stuff and knowing where weather hits and making claims, they don't have customers and paying out, and adjusters. And so everything moves the needle, right? Like it's an economy that we're in. I just think that there is a certain level of, insurance companies get beat up on technicalities, right? Like on, discos and technicalities, and we're, you know what I mean? Like in Florida is a matching state. So one tile's gone, isn't made anymore. Got to replace the whole roof. I mean, that stuff gets expensive, and like what's happening is the cost of inflation and home building is not keeping up. I mean, they'd have to charge for insurance, like kind of what's going on in Texas. They're starting to try to do 2% deductibles, and the house prices have raised so fast that these deductibles are gotten crazy, but insurance companies can't keep up with it with their pricing mechanism, right? They're like, we'd have to charge everybody, $7,000 a month to keep up with the pace of what's going on. And so they're trying to come back and have some cost control, and that's where I think like the working with them, I think is going to happen at a large scale to where like you can be the roofing company that wants to be rebellious. And like I said, when I kind of walked away, like I was rebellious. I was like, oh, F this, I can make more money doing this and messing with this. I don't need this program. It's a problem when like a huge chunk of the market share decides that they're going to go and be okay with the price controlling, right? Because private equity groups and conglomerates, they're in it to make money. They're not in it for like the owner making money. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not worried about it. One owner, they're worried about this huge volume. And then they've got connections in a world. They've got money, but they're connected to Allstate's CEO or CRO or COO or whatever, to where they've got an inside track that you're fighting against. And if you're one of those rebellious contractors that's just sitting there, you run the risk of, you know what I mean, getting buzzsawed. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that like the industry's going anywhere. Mortgage companies need to get involved. I mean, that's
you said the word rebellious. I like to think I don't look at a company that wants to. I think they want to stay autonomous, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being autonomy. I think it's you talked about. You raised a really good point when you talk about insurance companies, right? They're trying to move. How do they keep making money, right? So they're moving to these percent deductibles, which has been happening over the last 5-10 years. And our market's the same. Everything's 1% to 2%. They're getting rid of it. We all know that ACV is like the thing, but there's been this big push, and I truly mean when I say this, I'm not trying to go down like the political avenue, but the global scale that we're looking at things is, like you just talked about, everything's owned, everyone's interconnected. And I think because Elijah brought up, there's a younger generation now that's kind of getting more involved, not just in our industry, but in general, trying to speak out against that. You talked about home pricing. You can't, like the average 29-year-old can't afford a home, right? We could go down to that whole, $50,000, $70,000 worker. And when you just look at rent, house pricing, like they can't afford things, right? So that, like you alluded to earlier with one of your statements, that it's all connected. I think there's going to be I think you could be 100% right, where there's this oligarchy type thing that has been, that's like the word being used right now. I think there's going to be a lot of pushback against that because how the internet works now, that you can see that everyone's connected. Wait, this contractor is connected with Allstate, and Allstate's connected to BlackRock, and BlackRock's connected to the senator from that state. Like it's crazy, which I think I can see your view on it, where you're like, either you get in to be part of it, but I think there's also something to be said that I like to personally, that having the autonomy of being by yourself, right? You're right. Hey, roofing might turn into a big box type thing. It is what it is. We all can't foresee it. Is that where it's going? Maybe. But I think there'll always be, a smaller shop somewhere, right? You can go to Menards, you can go there, but there's still Ace. Now that maybe not the greatest example, because Ace is a pretty big store in our area. I don't know if you guys have Aces in Texas.
So like the market share is what I'm talking about. I think there's going to be about 5 or 6 companies that matter. You know what I mean? Like you're going to have 5 or 6 huge conglomerates that are tied to whatever network that they're tied to. And you're either
in roofing, you mean?
Yeah. I think ACs, like look at that. Like you can't go start an AC company very easily and really compete, because the pricing leverage that they've got, there's a bunch of huge ones out there, and it's impossible.
Yeah.
It's like competing with, I've always, unfortunately maybe cut my own throat on this, but I've always told people like, hey, anything anybody can do, we can do. There's not any Amazon or Walmart of roofing. So like material pricing, labor, well, that's starting to not be true. It's starting to be like there is going to be some Amazons and some Walmarts that are in the space that are going to make it harder to compete. And I'm not saying that you can't compete. That's what I mean, rebellious. I'm a very rebellious person by nature, right? But competing you're going to have to be ready for it. And it's going to change, right? And that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I actually, well, to allude to what you're saying, I'm not to cut you off or anything, but like, I agree with both your guys' side on it, but I think what you're saying is, I guess that's what I'm trying to say is, if I'm going to be here and we're going to do this, then I think that we do need to staff up and be prepared that if collaboration, whether it be platform, PE, whatever obstacle we decide to go down, I think even if we decide, hey, this isn't for us, like this is where we're at, when we make that decision, we also need to make the decision that if we say no to this, then that means that we got to build that shit on our own. Like, we have to be big. I agree with that. You got to have 100 reps to dump out against the 150 that the other guy has. Like, you have to own a market share. You have to brand yourself well, and you have to be known on a higher level than just known in your backyard. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. And that's, like I said at the earlier part of the conversation, is I've done that. I've had 120 some odd people. That culture is hard to maintain. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard because then you have this revolving door, and this is how a lot of them do it. They don't have long life expectancies of these reps. They just keep constantly recruiting people, throwing people in. And that takes away from the culture of like the family part or the friendship bond part of a business, that if that's what you want. You know, if you want something large corporate feeling, that's hard. You know, it's expensive, and that's where like these guys, if you don't have the bankroll or the Elon Musk money, you know, it's hard to maintain paying salaries and you know, driving and cracking that whip on micromanagement and all that stuff is not made for everybody.
Oh, 100%.
You know, so
we left the corporate setting. That's why. That's
well,
why
yeah,
we're
and
at
that's
right now.
and that's what I mean. And the roofing wasn't built on a corporate setting. I've always said like I wanted to destroy the corporate structure, which is, like I said, I'm a rebellious person, but it's also idiotic in the sense of like I'm not smarter than that, right? I haven't built anything worth billions and billions of dollars. So obviously that model of structure works, but you have to have a lot of things in place to build that out. And like I said, it's getting a little off topic of kind of going down a bunch of different rabbit holes, but it just depends on what you want with the company. I'm just saying, like, I'm thinking about it. I'm seeing stuff. I've ran into stuff that kind of goes along with my theory. The group of collaboration, what's cool about it is we're making each other money.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that.
So,
I mean, because you got it, which is great. You just kind of jumped in and started talking. You know, we didn't go much about it. Usually it's like, hey, what's your history all day? And I love this because these are things that we all don't know about. Or, you know, you're coming from a completely different, you know, market, right? We're here. What have you, so let's talk about that a little bit, because you're already collabing with some other companies, you know, so if you want to touch on, you know, your experience right now with what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, we've had conversations with Romans, with Mike and Elijah, been part of some of this as well, but it just comes down to all the ideas that I'm talking about. How do you have conversations in those regards, right? Because if I went by myself as a company and tried to talk to suppliers or MRP programs or carriers or anything that's in roofing, right? Like AI technology, investors, whatever. It's a lot more appealing to them being something of size with a bunch of people involved, right? Because they have it's like a battleship board, you know, it's like, yeah, we don't understand storm, but if you have the whole country pretty much covered where storm systems go through, probably a good chance that you're going to hit somewhere, right? Like something's going to bingo or whatever on the board. And so those conversations have gone really well for as fast as we've moved this thing and started to build it out. Cutting, some overhead ideas and best practices. I mean, I've recently probably gotten rid of about $70,000 to $100,000 a month in overhead and efficiencies that we're using and things like that. So it's there's just a lot that goes into it. Shared services model. Oh yeah, you're not a sipper. The shared services model also is something that's like, it's like a fractional CFO. If you're fractionally getting something and everybody's involved in it, well, it's cost effective. Right? It can be more cost effective, make your bottom line better, make more money. Obviously, more money leads to being able to recruit, market, maybe go into a different market, more financially secure than, like I did, was just winging it, and taking my shot in the dark, hoping it worked out. And so it's just, all of that stuff combined has been really good. Other companies, it's a little bit of protection and shielding them because, like I said, I've made mistakes and so have other people that are involved in this thing. And it's like trying to help avoid some of those mistakes. Now, are they going to listen every time? I don't know, but at least they had some advice, or maybe it saved them a couple $100,000, on paying the wrong guy that they didn't need because they already had it at the platform, or running into some kind of market, kind of crazily without thinking about certain things that are involved. Having licenses in other states where you can quickly move, right? Because licensing can slow you down. Like if you wanted to go to Florida tomorrow, you couldn't, because there's a process there of licensing. And so you're going to have some partnership or some kind of something if that's what you want to do. And so all of that, giving options to people that are involved, I think is really cool. I used to not talk to any kind of roofing company because it was like that, limited mindset of like, keep everything I know, like kind of hush hush and held so I don't get it used against me.
Yeah.
And then this model is different because it's like, hey, we can talk about it because I don't even want to be in your market. I want you to thrive in that market. And it is like obviously leverage if we want to transact. Like if we decide to do that, we're going to have the highest value that we're ever going to get because it's a collective that's all in or all out, right? And so it's a platform And that's what private equity is wanting to do, like the small ones. And that's who's bought most of these companies. I know it's a lot of money that they're spending, but they're trying to spend that money to flip it to somebody bigger, right? And so they have a time constraint with that because they've got somebody else's money that's like, hey, I want my return. This is supposed to move. What is going on? And then they start coming into those companies and slashing and cutting and trying to change everything or reform companies. And that's why a lot of private equity has a bad rap with a lot of people, or I don't know of too many people. It's like, this is amazing.
Well, I can give you a prime example. The last place we were together, and when I rolled my company into what was going to be an IPO roll up and everything, there was a room full of talent that was ridiculous in the roofing industry. The problem was that the room full of talent wasn't able to do what the room full of talent needed to do because you had a C-suite that was basically cock blocking everything. They weren't the C-suite, they were the cock block suite. Like literally, that was the biggest problem. Everything had to come from the top down and everything was just locked up. And the goal was to get to $100 to $200 million company. If you look at everyone who left and added up all the money they did last year, you're between that $100 to $200 million company. If they would have just let us go and do our thing and let us collaborate, because I mean, that was one of the perks of working together with all these different companies. We learned the best practices from each other. So we all got better. But then when we wanted to do something to get better, there was the cock block up top that stopped everything. Yeah. And that's like literally the reason that failed is because of the C-suite. Yeah. Like the talent in that room, and you guys know all these people too. Like the talent in that room was just ridiculous.
Oh, we talked about it all the time. Like that's probably one of the top 3 things that gets brought up on this is some of the first guests we've had were people that we all worked with, right? And they came from this company. And we talk about that, like in Northwest Indiana alone and right over again to the border, the amount of people that have their own companies now that are thriving, I would say 70, 80% of the companies, in at least Indiana, all really worked together at another company. There's somebody from that company either managing it, owning it. It's wild. And they were all together at one point. But I mean, Mike, it's exactly hit it on the head. Everyone had good ideas. Everyone gelled really well. It was then, how do you implement it? Yeah. Somebody else from above you would stop it because it didn't fit whatever they thought was the right practice. But you talked about options. I just want to keep talking about that. Is I like that the idea of that of having more options. I think that's a really good way of looking at the market. I love the idea that if a guy wanted to go move somewhere else, potentially, hey, we're connected with these people. We can take care of you. I think that's a really good thing to look at. And it reminds me a lot of, and I don't know how it would be now, but like the SRS model. They have a bunch of independent companies, and it kind of sounds similar to, I could be wrong, right? I'm not trying to misspoke. You and I've only honestly talked
you're good.
twice.
You're good.
Via Zoom. But it kind of sounds a lot like that. Like you have this autonomy of yourself, you run things yourself, but if you need to get added, we'll add you like as a customer, right? Or in SRS's case, like a contractor. You can just call them, they get added, and then everything transfers. But I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about that, is I know you're obviously working on this. And so where exactly are you trying to kind of branch these ideas? Because if you look at it from across the country, if you have someone in each state, I guess, what does that look like for you? Because for everyone you're like the brainchild behind this, right? Like this was your idea, and
originally, one of them, and now there's a collective, but yeah,
but it's a great idea. There's no bashing there. That's the idea is great. It's just in how obviously this is part of it, right? You're trying to get other people involved. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that aspect of it.
Which part of nationwide? What part are we asking?
Correct. Like I guess there's a lot there. So you're in Texas.
Correct.
I believe you have someone in Oklahoma. Is it Florida? Technically, I think it would be
Missouri,
Illinois,
Colorado,
Arkansas. Arkansas's been a good market for us.
Arkansas, okay.
Northwest.
So
Arkansas.
how has that been going with what you guys are doing now?
There's no PA in Arkansas too, right?
No.
Yeah, you can't be PA at all.
No. And that keeps their deductibles are like $500, $1,000. Like they're pretty. In the claims don't pay out as high. You know what I mean? Like dollar for dollar. But it's still a good market. But look like for me is, like I said, cutting a lot of costs with some of the ideas, partnering, having some other voices. Because, as an owner, like y'all got a lot. Y'all got a lot of owners in this building, I don't, right? And so like mentorship of where do I go if I have a problem, if I, you know what I'm saying? Like if
Yeah.
anything, you know, I'm always the one that has to make the executive decisions, and they're not always right. You know, like sometimes I have to adjust, you know, course and fix and all that stuff. And that gets hard and it gets taxing on your people sometimes. So just having, you know, kind of that collective group of like energy, you know, I get down every now and then just like anybody else, and having them, hey, can we help you with anything? Or like, hey, this is some positive idea comes out of nowhere, you know, like, you know, one of the companies,
I need some ice in that bad boy, man.
like one of these companies is got, I mean, like a commercial, like estimating type thing that they're doing and sending out like $100 million in bids monthly and not really slowing down. And all of a sudden they become a pretty large commercial outfit. And I'm like, can we copycat that in our markets? You know, and like, that's what we're, you know, stuff like that is what we're working on. To, you know, I think that makes everybody, you know, like it, more jobs, more revenue, more money. I mean, that's what businesses need. Right. And so that's what it looks like for me. And then it just, you know, the guys that are involved, we want good people, you know, like we don't want guys that are like these, you know, the typical egotistical roofer, like, you know, your shit doesn't stink and they're, you know, like they're not.
Oh yeah, no, we know people like that,
you know,
right
like
in our backyard.
It's in the industry. I know I've got tattoos and you do too, and beards and trucks and all that stuff. It's kind of the typical roofing starter kit, but
that's a badass start. Hang on, that's a badass starter.
Yeah, there you go. But you know what I'm talking about. You got some of these guys that are just like, they care about nothing but money. They don't care about people. They don't care about the homeowner. They don't care about stealing. It's all just them. And so we don't want people like that, which is kind of crazy with what we created, because a lot of it's like, you know, some of our faith is aligned and stuff like that, you know, and I'm not trying to Bible thump by any means, but it's like that's like a godsend in a way. It's like, oh, I'm supposed to do this, or this is making sense because it's easy. You know what I mean? It hasn't been like this hard tug of war of collaboration and starting to move the needle and help people make money. And it feels good to help guys. You know, there's one of the companies is in Maryland. I'm not going to Maryland, right? But he's a younger dude, he's pretty successful, and like helping him leads and strategy and cost efficiency and, you know, back office stuff that he, you know what I mean? Like helping him. If I had that, you know, if I had any of that when I started, I'd probably be a lot richer and wealthier and larger, man. You know, and you know, like just using companies that if you look across the board, I mean, let's just use a Linear. I don't know if y'all know who that is or not. I'm sure you probably do. Linear Roofing or Linear, or whatever you call it.
Oh, Linear. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they've went private equity. They've sold. They're huge. They went from LA Fitness, you know, like workout guys, but they had corporate like CEO people that were involved in that company, right? Like most of us guys didn't have that. That wasn't our experience, expertise, or anything like that. So they were able to kind of build the way they did and then get out the way that they have. And it made sense for them. And that would have been great if we all had that. You know what I mean? Like if you had somebody connected to you that had some of that experience, and it's like, hey, this is the financial model that you're going to run into. This is the forecasting, or this is the issue that you might have. Like some of that stuff would be very important intel, you know? So all that's really first and foremost is that the intel, the making money, protection of like not getting ran over by somebody coming in and trying to take large market share because we're something of size that can fight it back. And we're not independent, right? Like we're not by ourselves. So that's what I mean by having those conversations, you know, like, and being involved in that landscape.
All right, we're breaking this one into 2 episodes. That's a wrap on part 1. We'll be back next week with the rest of the conversation. Until then, stay locked in with the Roof Trollz.